the Declaration of Independence populist? Isn't
Yes.
the U.S. Constitution populist?
Against the elites of England.
And in many ways, the United States showed the world what modern day populism could be. I didn't realize I was populist. I thought I was just reasonable and rational. But I guess, that comes with different labels now, and populism has often been labeled very negatively. Well, aren't the roots of America populist?
There's nothing wrong with there being an elite. There has to be an elite. There has to be someone running the country. So,
Right.
so it's not that, it's the failure of the elites that's the problem.
There has to be a unified approach to addressing the they, right? You're like, who is they? They did this, they did that, but who is they?
Have you been on the list?
I think since March, I've been on the list.
And was March when you endorsed RFK Jr.?
When I came out of my liberal closet.
But even at that point, he had been labeled as unacceptable, not acceptable to the Democratic establishment. So you must have known, you must have thought, this might get me in trouble.
After my announcement speech, where I call out Big Pharma and Big Tech, things really accelerated. It makes being a proponent of Trump very dangerous. Politics is so destabilizing for the individuals who go into it, for the individuals who speak up about it, that you better have a damn good reason. You better know exactly what it is you care for and what you're willing to fight for. Winston, thank you for
Nicole.
joining me here today. I have to say, you went viral online after your debate with Nancy Pelosi, and my initial reaction was like, look at this proper Englishman at Oxford Union debating Nancy Pelosi so beautifully and eloquently. And then I realized who you were. I was like, this guy is a rock star. And I've listened to Mumford and Sons since college. It's beautiful music.
Thank you.
So what was that like watching a debate with Nancy Pelosi on the issue of populism, which, by the way,
Well, you're a populist, huh?
I didn't realize I was populist. I thought I was just reasonable and rational. But I guess, that comes with different labels now, and populism has often been labeled very negatively by, the establishment.
Oh, absolutely.
Le Pen, for example, from France, has been labeled as this crazy populist trying to take France backwards. And that was my impression of Marie Le Pen until I looked a little closer. And when I looked a little closer and I looked past, what the media was saying, which I believed for many years, I realized that what individuals are doing right now who are being labeled as populist are just trying to call out discrepancies in governance in their country. And those discrepancies often have to do with process and procedure and what is in the best interest of their country and their countrymen. You went ahead and tried to reclaim what populism is.
Yeah.
Why did you decide to do that? How did you do it? And how would you explain the journey?
Yeah, so I consider myself a populist. In fact, I'm very proud to be a populist. And populism takes many forms. And even though everyone agrees that populism exists, no one actually agrees on what it means. And I know no one likes a pedant, but it's worth just exploring that, because I don't fully accept your definition there. I think it's one thing further. It's specifically the politics of ordinary people in contention with an elite. And that's a really important aspect, which means that you have right-wing populists and left-wing populists, and populists on all sorts of issues. So, for example, in that speech at the Union with Pelosi, I mentioned your colleague RFK Jr. because you and him are populists. It is the pharmaceutical elites that you guys are rallying against in the name of the ordinary people. So that makes you a populist. Now, I would say that that's a traditionally left-wing populist, and other left-wing populists would include, in my country, Jeremy Corbyn, who constantly talks about for the many, not the few, and it's about economic populism. That's an elite class. Your equivalent here is Bernie Sanders, constantly going after the billionaires, even though he himself is a millionaire many times
Yeah, he
over.
seems to have dropped that mission recently.
Has he?
In practice. I mean, he'll still verbalize it, but I think in practice he's fully aligned himself with many of the elites and large donors and pharma as well. I mean, he's fully pitching drugs and figuring out how to get more drugs on the market for less money. And yeah, I think that something happened after he ran, and he's fully aligned with Biden now. But I will agree with you that when he ran for president, he did ring to the tune of the populism that you are describing.
Yeah. But then there's something happened when they replaced him with Hillary, and he could have continued against the establishment. But that would have meant going against the Democratic establishment.
Correct.
Which he did not do.
He did not do that.
And now presumably he's supporting Kamala, although I haven't paid much attention to Bernie recently.
Very much so.
Okay, so his populist days, I would say, are over.
I'd say they're
He's an
over
establishment.
too. I think Bernie is fully aligned with the establishment, sadly. Now. And we don't know how they get all of these endorsements, the left establishment, but they're certainly very successful at it. And their techniques and strategies around it are, I think, pretty refined. I think that they do good deal making, in the sense of they bring people in that are willing to subscribe to their version of establishment politics.
Yeah. But Bernie, what's interesting about him as a character is that of his base, and this is a really important, I think, aspect to American populism, of his base, when he went out of the running to Hillary, 25% of his base did not support Hillary.
Correct.
And of that, half of that 25% went on to support Trump. And so we have this odd splitting of different groups in this country where I think what all united those people was that they agreed on what the problems were in America. And Trump, obviously, is a populist. At first glance, a cultural populist.
Yeah.
But actually, there's a lot of economic stuff. And him going against the trade with China, for example, these are aspects, these were hurting American workers. And so they appealed to people you might think, they should be left-wing populists. Now, American populism, I think the American populist story, it's hard to know when exactly to start, but the modern era of populism, I could say it's very interesting to look at the battle for Seattle in 1999, because at that time, this is when the WTO, there was some deals that wanted to be broken with the WTO, more free trade, and you had what was largely a left-wing populist mob, I think about 40,000 people on the streets of Seattle, and you had the anarchist types, you had the environmentalist types, what would now look like a cliche left-wing
Occupy
group.
Wall Street, which was a very successful grassroots populist.
And very much left-wing.
And left-wing, yep.
Now, Battle for Seattle also had the likes of Pat Buchanan. So there were conservatives or paleo-conservatives. You mentioned Occupy Wall Street. That was swiftly soon followed by the Tea Party movement, which was a right-wing version of the same. The Tea Party movement and Occupy Wall Street, both populist movements, but very much one left-wing, one right-wing, economically speaking, both identified the same problems, but had different opinions on how to move forward with it. So this populist energy has been with America for at least 30 years, but really probably longer, and it has many forms.
Well, aren't the roots of America populist? I mean, isn't the Declaration of Independence populist? Isn't the U.S. Constitution populist?
Against the elites of England.
Yeah.
Against the elites of Britain, absolutely.
And in many ways, the United States showed the world what modern day populism could be, and that it could be incredibly economically successful, that it would stimulate a huge amount of innovation, and that it can coincide with a great degree of freedom and liberty.
The populism technically started, it was an agrarian movement, I think in Kansas or something, at the end of the 19th century. And these people were essentially Jeffersonian in outlook. They weren't necessarily, they're probably aware of Marx and the left-wing stuff, but it was kind of a Jeffersonian movement. So again, worth saying, the term, it has been a different thing at different points in history. I would say that even though, yes, I agree that America was founded by populists in that sense, technically speaking, but you can't be there's nothing wrong with there being an elite. There has to be an elite. There has to be someone running the country. So,
Right.
so it's not that, it's the failure of the elites that's the problem.
Correct. And that's, going back to my very simplistic definition of populism, it's calling out inconsistencies and incompetence in governance, right? And that's how I've kind of dissolved it down to just that very simplistic form is where is reason and ration in governance? Where is accountability? Where is we expect a certain level of performance from our elected officials. We also rely on our legal system to ensure there's due process. So that when there are failures, people are left with a voice. And perhaps, again, hearing about how you think about populism, that it's not necessarily a left or a right thing. It's really about people having a voice. But before we go into that,
if you watch The Winston Marshall Show, you'll be quite aware of the many dangers of big tech and government censorship. Using the internet without ExpressVPN would be like trusting Kamala Harris without a teleprompter. Or Joe Biden with one.
So, end of quote. Repeat the line.
Every time you connect to an unencrypted network, whether you're at home or in public, you're basically opening the door for a hacker to help themselves to your personal data. Hacking doesn't even require much know-how, just a bit of cheat kit and AI. But here's where it gets serious. Hackers can rake in up to $1,000 by selling your information. You willing to take that risk? ExpressVPN creates a secure, encrypted fortress between your device and the internet. It would take a supercomputer over 1 billion years to crack ExpressVPN's encryption. That's not just secure, that's Hadrian's Wall in digital form. Sure, as the English Channel has protected us in Britain from invasion for 1,000 years, so too ExpressVPN will protect you. And it couldn't be simpler to use. Fire up the app, press one button, and boom, you're protected. And it works on all your devices. My favorite thing about ExpressVPN is that I'm able to access international geo-block content and platforms. As you know, X was recently banned in Brazil. Rumble is banned in France. With ExpressVPN, that is not a problem. In an increasingly censorious world with ExpressVPN, I have nothing to worry about. Secure your online data today with ExpressVPN and get 3 extra months free by visiting expressvpn.com/Winston. And by supporting sponsors of this show, I remind you, you are supporting this show also.
that. I am very fascinated with your journey. How do you go from banjo player to all-star political commentator?
Well, certainly not all-star. Lowly English political commentator. It's been a crazy journey. I think we might have had some similarities in that, like you, I came from a more liberal background. In fact, even as a kid, I was canvassing for the Liberal Democrats, who in British, for those who don't know, that would be a centrist party, although since Brexit, they've become highly progressive, kind of comically progressive. I came from that sort of background, and even 2016, I obviously can't vote in your wonderful country, but I wanted Hillary to win. I didn't really understand Trump. Having toured this country extensively at this point now, I think I visited 48 states. I love your country. If I wasn't so patriotic, I'd say it's the greatest country in the world. But having visited so much of the country, and then I was living in New York at the time and surrounded by these liberal elites, and they were all saying, well, it's racism is the answer. And I was like, nah, I've lived in Nashville. I'd lived periodically in LA. I'd spent lots of time in the South. I was like, it's just not racist. Sure, there's racism, but it's not a racist country. Yeah. And it didn't make sense. And so then I went on a journey to be like, okay, I want to understand why people voted for Trump.
I saw somewhere that you read Andy Ngo's
Okay, so fast forward to the pandemic. Mm-hmm. And March 2021, so about 3.5 years ago now, through the pandemic, I'd been posting about books I was reading to my not many followers. Yeah. And one of the books I posted about was the American conservative journalist Andy Ngo. He had a book called Unmasked, documenting Antifa, the BLM riots, mainly through 2020, mainly in Portland and Seattle, but across America. I'll remind you that after George Floyd's death, 19 people were killed in the first 14 days of those riots. 25 people were killed by the end of October 2020. Wow. But that wasn't being covered in the mainstream media. Andy Ngo wrote this book covering it all, documenting the unbelievable damage done to not just human life, but businesses. Ironically, black businesses a lot were damaged in the BLM riots. Yeah. And I think that's probably where my interest in that book came up. But I was also, I'd posted about reading Chairman Mao's Little Red Book and all sorts of things in between, a lot of plague literature. And I kind of, it's just, there's a big, I read all sorts of weird and wacky stuff through the pandemic. And so this book, I tweeted about it. I said, congratulations to the author, Andy. And I said he was a brave guy. Now, he'd already been attacked in Portland, suffering massive head injury.
My goodness.
And so I thought he was brave to document this stuff. And I learned just how brave he was because of what happened next, which is that there was an unbelievable dog pile. Now, I had about 3,000 Twitter followers, so it was insane.
3,000?
3,000, so nothing. And by the end of the weekend, it was a segment on The View and Tucker Carlson. So what was nothing just absolutely blew up. It went up all the trending charts on Twitter. I was like, oh my, like what is this?
You had posted your opinions about the book.
Mm-hmm.
And then a few other follow-on opinions about...
No, just that one tweet.
Just the one?
Yeah, absolutely, one tweet.
And that went viral.
Yeah. And there was a dog pile from the music industry. And my initial reaction was to just, look, it'll pass, whatever. But then people around my life started calling people very upset. My bandmates were very upset. And I wanted to put out the fire. I recognized that obviously it was...
What exactly did you say?
Something like, congratulations, Andy No, on your new book. You're a brave guy. It's as simple as that, with a picture of the book. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. It's as simple as that. It was
to your 3,000 followers.
Yeah. And as I say, went up the trending charts. Then that night we have this incident, and this happened to a few people. It's like kicking a hornet's nest. The hornets then come from every part of your life.
Yeah.
They went for the people I work with. They tried to scare the people I work with, my bandmates.
Yep.
One of the things they did is, let's say my Wikipedia page, they changed it from Winston Marshall as a banjo player to Winston Marshall as a fascist. I had a friend, great friend, which I'm very grateful to her. She spent the night changing it back to banjo player. But then the activist, Wikipedia's been completely hijacked by activists.
There's whole funded networks that monitor it to control their narrative, the narrative of others through Wikipedia. Paid, there's layers and layers and layers of it.
Yeah. So I've just did an interview of Ashley Rinsberg on my show, who you must have on, but he explains exactly what's going on, the inner workings and all these activists, how they collude. But it's so potent because Wikipedia is how most people, certainly normies, and even myself, use it when you want to get a quick...
So let me point out what happened to you.
Huh.
You got put on a list for that one tweet.
Have you been on the list?
I think since March, I've been on the list.
And was March when you endorsed RFK Jr.?
It was
when you came out
when I came out of my liberal closet and became maybe I finally became a public populist. I don't know, but yes, it was it corresponded right with my it was. I didn't actually actively endorse him. I just kind of floated around that I was involved in this Super Bowl ad for him, and the journalist kind of descended on me.
What was you doing in the Super Bowl ad?
We had put it together. So we put together a Super Bowl ad for him in about 36 hours.
Okay.
A PAC reached out. I'd never met him, but I'd been following his work. I thought it was really good and compelling. I thought his move to run as an independent was so smart and so compelling. And I was finding a lot of truth and bravery in what he was doing and saying, especially as it related to childhood health and taking on corporate capture, which are really intertwined in our country. And so I hadn't talked to him, but a PAC, I got put in touch with American Values PAC, Tony Lyons, who runs it, chatted with Tony. Tony has a vaccine-injured child. And he and I had like an hour and a half. When vaccine injured, or parents of children with special needs, when they meet each other, it's usually at least a 2-hour conversation. Because there's this connection of like pain, but also a desire to do something.
Have you got a child with special needs?
I have a child with special needs, yeah. and she is my motivation in life. And so I had done some, preliminary work, and I was like, yeah, what is going on with childhood disease? So I get introduced to Robert Kennedy's campaign. I get introduced to Andy Lyons, American Values. And they're like, hey, no one even knows Bobby's running for president, really. It's like a small section of the American public who already was kind of following his work. Could you help us get this out to Super Bowl is the most watched live event in the United States. And this one in particular got many viewers. But we aimed for 100 million impressions. And so we whipped together a Super Bowl ad and aired it. And it was a play on a JFK ad from the 60s. And it blew people's minds.
I remember I was very moved by it, I think.
It was the Kennedy. It was just a jingle. It was a Kennedy jingle that was written in the 60s.
Right.
No, it was really actually quite goofy.
Oh, maybe I haven't seen that one.
Yeah. We'll share it with you, but it takes the old ad and it puts Bobby Kennedy Jr. in it. And anyways, so that thing runs and the internet goes insane. They're like, what the hell did we just see? It was a little psychedelic as well.
Right.
Because it was like seeing an ad from the 60s during the Super Bowl. We have all these really modern, high definition ads. And then you have this one from the 60s. It blew people's minds. So it goes really viral. People are just like, what the hell? Who is this Bobby Kennedy guy? We see a spike in search results. And after that, I think I got put on the list.
So you got put on a list now. But can we, before talking about the list, can I just rewind one moment? Because as I understood, you were a Democrat supporter. And now
very active.
I can understand the appeal of RFK because as he is, how I considered myself was I always thought of myself as a Kennedy Democrat.
Same.
I always admired JFK and RFK, the senior. That spoke to me, and it was part of it was what we spoke about at home. But even at that point, he had been labeled as unacceptable, not acceptable to the Democratic establishment. So you must have known, you must have thought, this might get me in trouble, or I'm dancing here with...
I think I was very naive. And then after my announcement speech, where I call out Big Pharma and Big Tech, things really accelerated. And it's been a process that I'm, deep in the shit with right now. And I'm getting used to it. I'm getting used to being deep in the shit of being, let's just use the word, maybe targeted for my political views. Or, they just like your experience, how they went after how individuals, I try not to use the word they because I think it's too...
I was going to ask, who is they?
Who is they? The individuals of the establishment who are anti-populist, who want to stop that populist message, who have branded populism as dangerous. And just the same way that your band members were approached by this group of people, or it's like a Coconut Express almost of information. Like they call their immediate friends and they figure out who's around you, who has influence over you. And my case has been written about extensively. There's a congressman here who put together a petition to get signatures to convince me to drop out of the race.
Wow. But before then, at what point do you announce that you're going to be VP? Because we're not there yet in the story.
So that's March. So the Super Bowl ad was in February. Is that right? January, February.
Oh, right, yeah.
And then March 26th was my announcement. April was just a flurry. I it's hard for me to remember April too well because there was so much activity because the attacks were already starting, and it's there's a moment when you're thrust into the spotlight. I'm sure this happened to you, where you're just like, did I do something horribly wrong? And you get through that and you're like, no, I'm like a grown adult. I'm looking at everything. I didn't do anything wrong.
That's so interesting, right?
Yeah.
Because I had a similar experience. And I wonder if that's because you probably have trait agreeableness. Are you high in agreeability?
Oh, very much so.
Yeah.
I'm also a fixer.
You're a fixer.
Yeah.
Right. What does that mean?
That I'm motivated to try to solve for issues in the world, that if I see a problem, I want to race and try to fix it.
So if you're high in trait agreeability, so
Yeah.
this is what happened to me as well. Is I'm high. I'm about 80% on the big five on agreeability. So when you're then, everyone tells you you don't know, realize that this so-and-so is a fascist and you've endorsed a Nazi and etc. If you're agreeable, you're like, have I? Okay, well, maybe I don't know everything here. Maybe I need to understand it. Then you take this deep dive into exploring it and being like, okay, what did I go wrong? And you get to the point where you maybe gaslight yourself.
Oh, yeah.
Into thinking like, maybe I'm crazy. Like, and it actually literally happened to me. It sounds like you had a similar experience.
I had a similar experience, and I, quite frankly, retracted. I retracted from the media. I wanted to get my grounding, and I actually started this podcast as a way for me to explore this decision to run for office. I was like, I want to talk to people who are watching politics more closely than I am. I want to talk to people who have opinions that I, find to be objectively true, like children have the right to be healthy. Yeah. So I spoke to nurses, I spoke to moms. I wanted to get my facts on COVID correct as well. And so it was one guest after another guest after another guest. And I focused on this podcast to ungaslight myself.
So you did that publicly then?
I did it publicly. So if you go back into the records of this podcast, the Back to the People podcast, you will see my evolution as someone seeking some truth and grounding in this decision to go into politics, to leave my private life alone. Because to do that in a time where we literally have armed guards at the ballot boxes right now in our country, because it's so destabilizing. Politics is so destabilizing for the individuals who go into it, for the individuals who speak up about it, that you better have a damn good reason to do it. You better know exactly what it is you care for and what you're willing to fight for.
So you made a hell of a jump then, because it's not just to come out and be like, right, I want to get into politics.
Oh,
It's
no.
like, not just that. I'm going to run as vice president of the United States of America. That's a huge leap.
I had a little bit of naivety about it. I was like, it's not like I'm running for president. I'm just kind of like the sidekick, right? They're going to be nice. There's not so much to chew. They can do a little bit to chew apart the sidekick, but they're going to be fair. I was naive about that. But, to go back to your experience of kind of unexpected consequences of voicing something that you're just sincerely curious about, or sincerely trying to find meaning in, right? And find truth in, which is what human life is about.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Is the search for meaning. And then to have all of a sudden everyone seemingly around you turn to you with this look of confusion and disgust. Right? I mean, what was that like?
Yeah. So it sounds like this is also kind of a case of curiosity killed the cat. Because I suspect you're also a very curious person. You can't have a podcast unless you are a curious person.
I've always been curious. I mean, that's why I became a patent lawyer, because it was the least offensive way to be curious. You literally, as a patent lawyer, you sit in an office by yourself. This was my dream since I was 12, because I don't like being controversial. But
really? You're actually suggest something else?
I picked to be an intellectual property lawyer, literally one of the most boring areas of law, and not even in litigation. I would just file new patents to the patent office.
Yeah.
And I built a whole AI company to try to prevent people from litigating, because I find litigation so painful and so unnecessary and inefficient. And so becoming a patent lawyer to me was like my surefire path towards a non-controversial, curious life.
Huh.
Yeah. And I'm sure you picked up the banjo for similar reasons.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I mean, how many people prosecute the banjo player?
I think I'm not sure if everyone's necessarily that curious. Maybe it's is one of the tribulations in having a curious mind. But
Yeah.
Absolutely. And one of the other things that, and we can talk about banjos if you want, which is also a populist instrument, I would say historically, but that's perhaps for another day. But one of my interests with Andy Ngo's work was that the mainstream media at that time, you'll remember, were not at all covering far-left violence. They were covering far-right violence rightly, but it's not the whole story. And actually, one of the criticisms of Andy Ngo's work is that he only covers Antifa and BLM and the far left. Now, I would say it's his beat. So if he's documenting one topic, he's to do that. But this frustration with the mainstream media, how much did that, which I really felt and continue to feel. Now you have seen how you've been dragged through by the mainstream media.
Yeah,
presumably.
still. No, there's a hit piece coming out on me by the Washington Post tomorrow, I think.
Oh, how exciting. What can we expect?
All kinds of strange and bizarre allegations for which I attempted to say were not true and that they had fabricated sources and fabricated documents. Because some of the stuff is just so wild that, like, even repeating it and giving it any substance at all.
Yeah, quite.
Like, I think the goal is right now, ahead of the election, is that they're trying to divide me from they're trying to divide the MAHA movement and the MAGA movement, and they're trying to divide the allegiance.
Right.
So they're trying to paint me as, anti-freedom of religion, which is so bizarre because, like, I wrote my college thesis on freedom of religion in China and India and did, like, a constitutional comparison. And my mom, left China because she wanted freedom. So anyways, and they paint me as being, like, anti-woman and anti-mothers, which is, like, so bizarre because this is what I care the most about is healthy women and healthy children. And preserving female health, right? Because it's also under attack the same way childhood health is under attack.
Now, Nicole, does that hurt you when these things, or have you grown used to it and just ignore it? When the press says this
so
kind of nonsense?
This next chapter of my ungaslighting myself is to bring on people like yourself to describe their experiences, because it's a process. It's continually, I think, a process of checking in. And yes, it's painful. I mean, like, the personal attacks, which I won't share about here, they're extraordinary, because this is when Nancy Pelosi talked about her wrap-up smear campaign. That
I didn't see that.
Oh yeah, she's talked about it. It's a approach by those in power to basically surround an individual that they're seeking to discredit. And it's called I think, wrap-up campaign or wrap-up smear campaign. And they find out what you care about most, and they go after that.
Pelosi said that publicly.
She did.
She is odious, contemptible woman. What a horror. It's one thing to do that, another thing to even admit it. That's psychopathic.
It is, isn't it? And so you did such an eloquent job just taking her on the substance of populism.
Well, can we just, before we come back to Pelosi, I just want to make one point on what you're saying about when you get this sort of attack from the mainstream media.
Yeah.
And having observed it myself and it being a horrible experience, I've been thinking recently that everything that's happened, this populist movement, needed someone like Trump at the spearhead. Because
it's a good topic.
He does not care. In fact, it probably makes him stronger. He likes the attention. He likes that, even, for him, all publicity is good publicity. He doesn't mind if it's negative. And actually, to take on the Democrat establishment machine monster that it is, you need someone with those personality traits. I don't know how anyone else could possibly endure. If you think about not just that, he also has completely changed the GOP. And to do that, you kind of have, who else would have the personality but him? Now, I suspect also your colleague, RFK Jr., he's had a lifetime of experience being in the public eye. He was brought up in the public eye. So he gets it. So it's another example of someone. It has to be him, because few people could possibly have the resilience. And for him, it's not just the media; it's also his own family. I mean, that's what's been absolutely hideous to see. His family turning on him. I was more angry about that than any other thing the Democrats have done to RFK Jr.
Well, yeah, because it's painful. It goes to a sacred relationship, your relationship with your family, and certainly that is a technique that is used. So I think you bring up a really important topic that I think needs to be fleshed out. How does Donald Trump endure? And it's not just him. I have to give a lot of credit to the people around him who have also been attacked. I mean, today CNN announced Rudy Giuliani has to give up his luxury goods to 2 Georgia ballot box workers.
What? Why?
For defamation case, but they're taking away his luxury goods, including, they cite in the CNN article, a watch that was gifted to him by a European dignitary. I mean, so this is, we're going into
It's Giuliani. Look what happened to Bannon. Look what happened to Pete Navarro.
Yeah, Michael Flynn, General Flynn.
Everyone around him, they try and take him down. They've done everything they can to take down him. 4 lawsuits.
It makes being a proponent of Trump very dangerous.
Very dangerous, and which is why it's very curious for you to put your neck on the line. Elon Musk is another great example of this. There's only downside for Musk. Why do it? Because he could have just kept his mouth shut, carried on. He's sacrificing a lot to do that, to put his neck on the line. Anyone who comes out in support of Trump, you're going to just get the machine coming out after you.
Yes, very much so. And they dial it up based on how close you get to him and what functions you play on his behalf. And so for me, I'm looking at this and I'm like, I've never actually met Donald Trump to date. Bobby made the decision to suspend and endorse him. My job as vice president is to support my candidate. We consulted with it. I have to say I was very impressed by Donald Trump. The same day he was nearly assassinated in Pennsylvania, he called Bobby back that evening to talk about childhood health.
Wow. That video was leaked, actually. I did see the conversation.
It was leaked, yeah. Unintentionally. Stuff happens. But it was, for me, I've been as much a spectator of this as I have been a participant. Watching it all has made me realize that there has to be a unified approach to addressing the they, right? You're like, who is they? They did this, they did that, but who is they? And how do we try to connect with the they with some bit of humanity and restoring some degree of peace and understanding? So the they is, mainstream media. They're a big they. They're a tool of the bigger they.
Yeah.
And then if you look at who owns these outlets, right? Washington Post, owned by Jeff Bezos, major Democratic donor. Their editor-in-chief is Matt Murray, who was previously at the Wall Street Journal, whose big job there was to take down Elon Musk. So now he's moved over at the Washington Post to do similar kind of work. The Atlantic, owned by Laurene Powell Jobs, major Democratic donor. So elite tech people.
The New York Times.
Yeah,
We just
New York
heard that Soros has just bought 200 radio stations. You note,
Yep.
no one bats an eyelid about that. This morning, I've just learned how there's an English group called the Center for Countering Digital Hate, who have a leaked document by Matt Taibbi saying that their main objective is to kill, quote, kill Musk's Twitter. Now, you see, this is the machine I think we're alluding to. It's the institutions, it's all these organizations, it's mainstream media, we could have this conversation, talk about university capture. The blue blob is huge, and they don't even realize it themselves. So that's why it's curious to see Musk buys Twitter, and that for them is suddenly a threat to them. So the Reds have one piece of the pie, one slice, and for them it's like, he's the devil, we've got to take him down. So it's very deep, the they. But then there's also, here's the thing which maybe you might have been alluding to earlier about how do we be reconciling to the people? Because if half of America are going to vote for Kamala. We don't know. I mean, the polls are leaning, as we speak, more towards Trump.
Right.
But certainly last time half of America voted for Biden. The time before that, half of them voted for Hillary. That's the people you want to be conciliatory with, I presume. Right? So how does one be conciliatory to them?
I think this now takes us to religion, because that's the only answer I have found.
Yeah.
Because you can't fight that kind of behavior, which is really cruel behavior, with being cruel back. Doesn't work. Makes the situation worse. You can attempt to stay stoic, strong, and seek to bring the truth forward and ally with truth seekers, which is what's happening, I have to say. You're experiencing it, and I'm experiencing it as well. And then the final piece is really trying, there's still a bit of reason in people, and you don't know where it is and who's influencing it, but trying to reach that point of reason. And really what started me on this journey was understanding that reason and logic is actually a God-given gift. The Greeks said it was a gift from Persephone to our world. Nature, which is strictly based in logic and reason. There's a design. There's a beautiful design and intentionality to the way nature works. And if you can find that in individuals and realize it is a sacred and God-given right of being alive, and you share that along this journey while staying strong and brave, while you're being persecuted, that the blob can't get you. Because their ultimate power over you is based on pain and fear.
So what is your faith then, if you don't mind me asking?
Well, I assume we're like a similar age. I mean, I was an alternative loving person, right? Alternative music, alternative religions. I backpacked through Asia in college and loved Buddhism and studying ancient forms of mysticism, and was really inspired by that. And honestly, I've always had Christianity running in the background. Whether it was a high school I went to St. Mary's. It was a Catholic high school in Berkeley. But it was always running in the background, but I didn't get it. I didn't need it, perhaps.
Yeah.
But now I need it.
The Christian aspect.
I need the guidance of what I think Scripture offers. And there's I can't say outrightly that I'm Christian, but I will say that of all of the religious books I've read in my life and the philosophies, that there's like Greek Gnosticism that really preceded, if you think about Jesus's time on this earth. And he really traveled and was a great philosopher, and arguably is the greatest rabbi of all time.
It's not arguable.
Yeah,
he was.
He was the greatest rabbi of all time, and so reading into it now, and I do so with almost like this incredible humble hesitation, because I don't know that I understand what I'm reading half the time. But
you're drawn to the Christian scripture.
I am.
Yeah.
Never expected this outcome. But there's something about reading like Psalms 23 that has been remarkably comforting for me.
What is Psalms 23?
David walking through the valley of death, God setting a table with his enemies. It's just it makes sense to me for the first time in my life.
Yeah.
And I think it almost required this happening.
Yeah.
Something so dramatically causing of ego death.
Yeah.
So dramatically causing of an absolute ripping away of one's most precious notions of their own life. And to have it kind of just pile on and then on and on and on again. And the pressure to basically say I give up or I was wrong. Right? Because I think they'll leave me alone if I just say, I'm sorry. Okay, go Kamala. Right?
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
Will they leave me alone if I say that? Right?
You must never enough to give in.
But we can't, right? We can't because it would be disingenuous.
Yeah, you must tell the truth. That's an important part of what we're commanded to do as Christians. Hearing you speak there, I'm reminded of what Nick Cave said, the musician. He said that religion is spirituality with rigor. And although I didn't have the same journey as you, I was for most of my 20s an atheist. Not a very good atheist. I was far too sanctimonious. Or maybe that's part of the course of atheism. But I came back to Christianity through a painful divorce. And then through all of this, my life now, having left the band and being not on the same sort of front line that you're on, but similarly feeling it in my country, you're kind of under constant attack. And it does feel like a spiritual warfare, and it does feel like chaos. And for me, knowing Christ has been my source of strength and a reminder also to keep hold of my soul no matter what. Like, that's all you've got. They can take everything else, but they can't take your soul. So for me, all of this does feel like spiritual warfare. And I've heard this from a few people who get caught up in it. It does feel like an attack on not just your body. And then it does end up feeling physical, but
it does actually end up feeling physical. And interestingly, I've heard of people saying it even shows up in their dreams.
Oh, yeah. I've heard stories of people being in studios and just being quiet, not saying anything. Politics, this is another classic thing I remember from 2016 around that election, is that everyone was talking about politics all the time. And it was like, fuck Trump, da, da, da. And then eventually it comes around to you and you're like, well, what about this policy? Like, I think what he said about NATO is probably right, actually, or I kind of think he might be right about this.
Yeah.
Then it's not that you're contradicting them. You're the person who brought up politics. They don't even aware that they brought it up. You're the one who brought it up. Now, what's crazy about it from the point of view of the artist is that if you're, let's say, a musician, you're in the studio, you're ready with your guitar, if in your mind you're self-censoring, you're like watching your words, that's also going to affect your output. You're going to be careful about everything, every aspect, every movement of your body, every note you play with your fingers. It crushes the arts. It's unbelievably damaging. And you've seen, it's very apparent in comedy. You see it particularly like the fall of SNL, for example.
Yeah.
Where they were, not even that long ago, maybe 2010 to 2015, SNL had a great period. There was unbelievable talent coming through, maybe even 2005 to 2015. Since Trump, 2016...
I've stopped watching it.
I stopped watching it. And here's a counterexample. The biggest comedy in America now is Kill Tony. Have you seen this show in Austin?
Yeah, no, I've seen clips from it. It's very funny.
And they've gone, it's just, not only are they saying whatever they think, they're being unbelievably provocative and unbelievably rude, and it's hilarious because it's like a valve for America. People they need to be able to speak. You need to be able to say. That's how your soul dies if you don't speak up. And you might be wrong, and that's okay to be wrong. But shutting up is going to kill your soul.
When you hear about this from artists, right? You hear about this like soul, this torturous expression with the soul, because art is an expression of the soul. So if you are censoring yourself and you can't get through that expression, arguably you can't make art.
It's not arguable. That's exactly what's happening to the arts.
Wow.
It's killing the arts. It's why Hollywood's had such a dreadful time recently, and so many flops. It's absolutely terrible. I'm curious about your experience with Silicon Valley. I mean, obviously, we're only up the road, and you said earlier you were working in AI. I just saw this week a graph showing that donors, although it's for the last 25 years, it's skewed Democrat.
Yes.
But this time it's skewing the other way. It's kind of a split. There's kind of like a red, blue, kind of almost the same amount of people. Now, you're at the forefront of that. You're part of that wave of Silicon Valley types who are going against the grain on Democrats. Well, do you feel like people are following your lead? Do you feel, what's the inside? Do you have insides?
Yeah.
What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, I've shared a little bit about my experience here. It's very interesting because you'll meet Trump supporters, but they'll never put up a bumper sticker and they'll never put up a sign because they'll say just simply, well, I can't. But you'll see Harris signs all over the place. Yeah. Being a donor from Silicon Valley, and to be fair, most of the ones that have donated to Trump, they actually don't live in Silicon Valley. Right. I'm one of the few.
Right.
There's actually a guy just around the corner, Tom Siebel, who's a donor as well.
So Silicon Valley there as a synecdoche really is kind of to represent people who work in big tech. Yeah.
So Google, everyone around Google is very left.
Dangerously
Apple,
so.
Yeah. Apple is, Laureen Powell-Jobs, she's very, and I don't even want to say left, Democrat establishment. She's very Democrat establishment. Stanford, very not even Democrat, because then you have Condoleezza Rice coming over. You see neocon. I don't know what to call this new
the Democrats are neocon now.
Right.
So that's not at all surprising.
Okay, so yeah, we'll call it the neocon Democrat.
Sure.
So Stanford is now a lot of folks in and around Stanford. And we're talking about the board members as well that come out because it's all very incestuous. You'll have folks from Stanford on the board who are president of Stanford who are on the board of Google. So it's all like very, very intertwined here. Facebook as well as part of that. So when we talk about like Silicon Valley and the neocon left, it's, Facebook, Google, Apple, Stanford.
Yeah, okay.
That's the team.
Yeah.
Anybody outside of that, though, who has the ability...
that's kind of everyone.
That is here right now, that is like set here.
So then who is the red?
So you see but they've all left. They're not really here anymore. So
they're affiliated with those...
Jack Dorsey has been out of here. I can't say he was ever really Silicon Valley, but he was, here San Francisco, fundraised here in Silicon Valley. Elon, for example, and the PayPal mafia and Peter Thiel, none of them are here anymore.
Right.
They're all gone. So anyone who could or was allowed to think for themselves has pulled anchor and gotten the hell out of here. The ones that are forced here, and I will say forced because I think that, their headquarters are here. Their roots are in and around Stanford, or their investors are from in and around Stanford, and they actually cannot pull their headquarters because of their board, because their board is part of the blob. Those folks are the ones remaining.
Okay, I see. So it's always geographical. So the blue that remains is actually those who are physically here. And then the red is everyone who's...
pulled ship. Yeah.
But you still, I suppose, would be then one of the... Are you then the sort of... Would you put yourself in the red camp or in the moderate camp?
I think I consider myself an independent. I will be probably an independent.
You've endorsed Trump?
I actually haven't outright come and endorsed Trump. I've endorsed the partnership between MAHA and MAGA, which I think is brilliant, and I wholeheartedly love it and endorse it. but I have not so much have gone out and campaigned for Trump. I haven't met the guy.
Yeah.
But I will say that I think his endorsement of our platform
Yeah.
is fabulous.
Would you
And
have
I'm so grateful for
would you have
that.
endorsed a MAHA Democrat coalition?
Absolutely.
So if you guys had decided to join up with the Democrats, you would have.
I think that's the beauty of being independent. It's party and candidate agnostic, right? We're really caring about the issues.
Yeah.
And we will find and support candidates who are fighting for those issues.
Okay, so I've got a difficult question for you.
Who's interviewing you here,
No, 'cause
Winston?
you're far more interesting than me. I'm not
No,
interesting. You're much more interesting. So on the MAHA-MAGA alliance, you say MAHA or MAHA?
MAHA.
MAHA-MAGA.
MAHA-MAGA. Yeah.
On the MAHA-MAGA alliance,
Yes.
how do you deal with Trump going to McDonald's?
So really brilliant. Bobby just put a post out about it today. McDonald's didn't used to be unhealthy. We used to fry French fries in beef tallow. The ingredients at McDonald's meal here compared to McDonald's in Europe and Germany has far fewer preservatives and ingredients in Germany, right? If you look at the list of like what goes into our American French fry versus the German French fry, it's like half as long, the ingredient list. The German one. The US, they just over the years have put more and more interesting preservatives, colors, food colors, and dyes and things. And the quality has just gone down. But so the McDonald's that a kid eats today, very different than the McDonald's I ate when I was 6 years old.
But Trump was selling the McDonald's of today.
He did say, pretty soon we're going to have these fries cooked in beef tallow.
Oh, he did?
He said something along those lines.
Oh, okay.
It would make a massive difference because right now they're being fried in seed oils. And if we brought back the French fries of yesteryear
Yeah.
and we fried our food in beef tallow, it's actually great. It's pretty good for you. Our bodies digest it great.
Yeah.
I just had French fries for lunch, cooked in beef tallow.
It's the best. Everyone loves
It's
French fries.
so good. You could cook it in duck fat. You could cook it in beef tallow. You can bake it.
Is it because it's more expensive that they moved to seed oil?
Yeah, I think so. And I
Or is
think
it- or
that
rather
the
it's
way
cheaper to go to seed oil?
yes, seed oils are much cheaper. I mean, many of these seed oils are mass produced. You mixed, various vegetable oils together, seed oils together. You don't have to talk about where it's from half the time, and you create these massive industrial vatfuls of oils that can ship pretty easily from manufacturer to restaurant. So yeah, price is definitely an issue, but if you go up the supply chain and you realize where all of things are broken that increase price due to inefficiencies and just bad governance and government funding, big ag and agrochemical businesses. I mean, this is one of the biggest issues in our country. If you go up the supply chain, it's very fixable. So we can actually reduce the price of beef tallow oil if we use our $1 trillion farm bill differently. And it wouldn't actually take much because beef tallow is interesting. You can't compost it. Most of it gets thrown out into a dump. And it's part of our beef production. And there's a lot of it that comes from a single cow. So if we had the infrastructure and we had the foresight to actually, create an industry that supported beef tallow being used in
Isn't
restaurants,
there a new beef
we could do
tallow
it.
industry where people are using it for face cream?
That's what I'm wearing now.
Oh, you're wearing beef tallow now?
Yeah,
Yeah, so I've heard it's coming back into fashion. It's like
it's fantastic.
much better for the skin, for acne and things like this. It's
It
very helpful.
clears most people's acne up within a few weeks of using it.
Yeah, and we were using it were humans using? If I understood, I just had this conversation with a friend back in London, and he surprised me. He was like, "Yeah, I've been making my own tallow at home in the back garden." I'm like, what?
Yeah. It's incredible. You can make soaps from it.
Yeah.
The lotions are incredible. You can cook in it. It's fantastic stuff, and it's
Make tallow
readily
great again.
available. Yeah, make tallow great again.
Yeah, so. Are you gonna, with Bobby? Are you going to? Is the plan, should Trump win, to be taking on big ag, big pharma, and big food?
Yeah, there's many ways to do it as both a private citizen and assisting our government get there. But I want to interview you in the last 10 minutes of this. So, okay. What are you working on now, Winston? And how do you see yourself as a private citizen involved in this? Do you have any political ambitions? Because I'm sure if you wanted to run for something in the UK, you've got fans there.
My country's in real trouble at the moment. And actually, America should keep an eye on what's going on in England if you want to know about how bad things can get. So we've just had a new Labour government with a Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, who openly calls himself a socialist. Every couple of days there's a new scandal. Last week he organised a business summit of all the world's great businessmen and did not invite Elon Musk, which was just an absolute absurdity. The reason being, obviously, because of Musk's politics. You can see that, as we mentioned earlier in this conversation about the Centre for Countering Digital Hate, they also have this anti-Musk thing. So what's happening in Britain, we have this two-tier rule that's been going on, where some citizens are being treated differently by other citizens, and it's going all the way to the top. And they are blind to how they're treating different groups differently. And so we had these terrible riots that happened in the summer, in August. This was inspired by the terrible, brutal murder of 3 young children in Southport in the north of the country. And these riots erupted. They were predominantly targeted at police and asylum seekers and mosques and Muslims, even though the killer was not either a Muslim nor an asylum seeker. But it's because there's this latent energy for a long time in our country about elite failure, coming back to our point about populism. Even under the Conservatives have ostensibly acted like progressives for the last 14 years that they've had power. Free speech is out the window. I'll come back to free speech, but our Prime Minister has he's released 1,100 prisoners. Now, to be fair to him, our prison systems are full. Some of whom immediately reoffended, to make way to put in these people in prison, some of whom, for example, a guy called Richard Williams, who posted a racist Facebook meme, he was given 3 months in prison. A wife of a Conservative councillor, whose name, I forget, Connolly, I think her name is Rachel Connolly, she's been given 2.5 years for allegedly inciting violence. Meanwhile, another terrible thing that happened this week is that someone's been criminally convicted of praying outside an abortion clinic. Mm-hmm. Meanwhile, as I witnessed in London, for example, on October 8th, the day after, obviously, 2023, there were masses outside the Israel embassy praying to a different god to the god of the man praying outside the abortion clinic, praying and celebrating Allah Akbar outside the Israel embassy, putting up flares, praying on their knees towards Mecca. Now, these people are not criminalized, just as the English, and I guess you would say the indigenous people, but not all of them are ethnically English. Mm-hmm. It's the culturally English versus the not culturally English. There's a famous example 2 years ago of an entourage of cars driving around a predominantly Jewish part of London with Palestine flags saying F the Jews, rape their daughters. They don't get prosecuted. That's not a problem. So basically, you have this two-tier system, and then you have a government who are hell-bent on prosecuting and persecuting the culturally English and the culturally British. One of the first things that Sir Keir Starmer did, which will be anathema to the ears of Americans, is he overrode the 2023 Freedom of Speech Higher Education Act. This was brought in, one of the very, very few good things the Conservatives did, and they were a disaster, really. But one of the good things they did is they brought in a free speech czar to sort out the free speech nonsense that had been happening in our universities, the same that you have here in this country. The first thing they did is they overrode that because it's essentially ideological, but they basically are worried about hate speech. So you've got all this issues about hate speech growing up, two-tier system. And I think it's the same as happening in America, but this two-tier that's happening in England, just pay attention, because if the certain people get their way in this country, that's what's in store.
It's a preview. It's
a preview. It's really important to pay attention. I think it's already happened here. If you look at the difference between how the Jan 6th people were treated compared to the 2018 storming of the Capitol after the Brett Kavanaugh appointment to the Supreme Court. Was it 2018 Supreme Court? Around then. And they went into... Now, it wasn't the same. There's different behavior. Obviously, no one died in 2018. I think 5 people died.
Well, in front of the White House as well, there was all kinds of riots, a desecration of government property, no arrests. There were like virtually no, and no. I mean, I think there was no serious prosecution, and the media didn't cover any of the individuals. Didn't make them out to be monsters. So we have that actually.
You do have it. Look at Portland, Oregon. The federal courthouse, i.e. federal property, in the year 2020, they tried to burn down the Hatfield courthouse whilst officers were inside. And meanwhile, Trump was trying to send in the National Guard. Pelosi was like, no, you can't do that. It's freedom of speech. Sorry, they're trying to kill federal operatives.
Yeah.
And you're saying, no, you've got to let them do it. Just watch the footage. So you asked me, what am I doing? Well, I one of the few things I'm doing is I run a YouTube channel. I have a podcast like you do. I did a documentary, and maybe you can put links to it, about what happened in Portland, which has become one of my beats because of my association with Andy and what happened. So I know that topic well now. And if you look at the hypocrisy, the double standard, and that's one of the reasons why people are supporting you, they're supporting Trump, they're supporting Bobby, is because they're fed up of the double standards that we're seeing.
Yeah.
And it's not just in America, it's happening in Britain, and it's terrifying.
Are you hopeful about a group forming in Great Britain? Not a group, but people are sick of it in Great Britain as well. They're feeling more and more desperate. We don't, I'm not going to say that there needs to be some, battle ahead, but, is there a way for us to reconcile our way out of this?
I would have a much better life if I came to America, and I can come to America. I've got great friends here. I used to live here. It's just beautiful. Everyone's wonderful. And it's particularly at the moment in Florida and Texas, what's happening. That's so exciting.
It's great.
I would even say what we're seeing might be a sort of, we don't know yet, but in the same way that Rome fell and then Constantinople lasted another 1,000 years, that might be, it's not out of the question that something like this happens. But I do think America will last longer than Europe. But hopefully Europe will last. Now, but to the question of England, I'm staying because I'm a patriot. I love my country, and I don't want it to be my generation that England fell, that Britain fell. I don't want it. And actually, a lot of people are fleeing the country. Labour are about to announce a new budget. It's predicted. The Telegraph wrote this morning that 6,000 millionaires and billionaires are projected to leave the country. This is classic Laffer curve. You tax more people, you generate less money because everyone leaves, and there's people find more ways to try and hide the money. Labour don't know that, or they do know it, and they're so vindictive. The classic socialist riposte to that is, they're leaving? Good. What you don't realise is that when the entrepreneurs leave, when the aspirational leave,
debt goes up.
Debt goes up, and the people that hurt is the poor. It's the poor that suffer.
Well,
These
that's
people-
what we're seeing in California. California is a preview for the rest of our country of what happens when you drive hardworking taxpayers out.
Yeah.
Like even at Stanford, at their delivery unit where they deliver babies, they've changed their structure. And now they have government, like more than half of the babies they deliver aren't paying. They can't pay. And so the whole unit is starting to go under because they're, taking in more and more, some of them undocumented, because they are so woke there. But it's actually starting to put such an enormous amount of pressure on the unit.
Yeah.
And so that's Stanford Hospital.
Yeah.
So we're seeing it across all of our institutions in California.
Yeah. Well, at least you have the federalist dream here, in which that people can actually. You have ties that bind, and it's not easy to leave your family or the place that you're brought up in. Whether you're coming from California and you're moving just to Arizona, that's still a big deal, and it's expensive to move. But at least you have that option. We don't have that in England. We don't have. We go to the next. You move from London
town
to Shropshire.
to-
and it's still the same fucking taxes. So
Right.
so we're in serious trouble. In Europe, is generally speaking.
Yeah.
So is there a
What
fight back
is-
for England? What's the future? Well,
What is the
a lot
path?
of people are moving to America. I'm going to stay. I don't know how long I can endure, but I love my country and I want it to succeed. And I hope that more people stay. And there's some serious talent putting their necks on the line that you have over here. And there's a great community in London. Another great thing we have in Britain that it's not the same here is everyone's in London.
Yeah.
So we have got a good community. And in America, what I noticed is very disparate. You're over here, there's a bunch in Austin, there's a bunch in New York, there's tons in Florida.
It takes a good amount of effort to meet up with your friends here.
Yeah,
Yeah.
quite.
Especially if you're in California. Well, thank you very much. I think with more great, committed patriot, it's hard for me to say the word patriot because here in California, it's such a bad word.
Is
but
it? Just like populist.
Oh,
You're
yeah.
a populist patriot.
Patriot is a really bad word here in California.
Really? Yeah. I thought I didn't get that impression in America. 'Cause here you have
Really?
you wave your flags outside your front porch. And you can't do that in England. The Labour government literally have been make
can't
fun
do that
of
now?
people for
Oh,
putting
my
the St. George's Cross on outside their houses.
You see less and less of those flags around here, I'll say. And you go to places like San Francisco, you see virtually none. Certainly not at people's homes.
That's ominous. That's very bad. As
Yeah.
soon as you lose that unify, the great thing about America is that it's the flag that, unlike England, which essentially was an ethnos is better than ethnic. All of Europe is the Westphalian. It's basically different tribes. America managed to do the dream of e pluribus unum. So you have many cultures united under the superculture of America, and that flag is that symbol. You lose that, there's trouble around the corner.
Well, I'm going to take back the word patriot, raise the flag.
Let's go.
It's a wonderful thing. Thank you so much.
Nicole, thank you so much.
Today.